Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I just want to start by thanking Deputy Tully for enabling this very important discussion this evening. Disabled people and their families only ever want what they're entitled to. In briefings by disabled persons' organisations, in meetings with distressed and frustrated parents, in all the reports from organisations, they just need proper services. They're not looking for anything exorbitant or for special treatment. They're just looking for what they deserve. They're fighting for their rights. Disabled people have the right to live as independent a life as possible, to suitable housing, to accessible public transport, to employment. Children have the right to be seen by medical professionals and therapists in a timely manner, and they have the right to education. These are all rights, the fundamental services people are entitled to. However, we all know that every day these rights are breached. Obstacles to access work are a breach. Delays in seeing a clinical therapist are a breach. Inaccessible public transport is a breach. These breaches are so commonplace and everyday that they're not even noted. It's only after repeated failures and frustrations that individuals and families contact their public representatives. It's only erroneous cases that make it into the papers. This is wrong on every level. People shouldn't have to go to these lengths. Disabled people and their families should not have to share very intimate details to get services. Unfortunately, the media have a particular role to play here, as stories around disability service only make it to the headlines when someone is willing to or is convinced to tell their own personal story. Recently, Catherine Gallagher, who shared her details nationally to retain and access supports for studying her PhD, spoke at the Disability Matters Committee about disabled people often not having the privilege of living with privacy, with dignity and with discretion. Until our systems are designed and operate off a rights-based approach, people like Catherine will have to continue to jump through hoops and go to papers. The failure to provide people with services have knock-on effects impacting on their quality of life, their potential throughout life, on their family, on how society understands disability. The key point underlying this motion is that disability services are a right. They are not optional services or some kind of charity. They are the basic support the state is obliged to provide individuals with. Progressing disability services is one of the key examples of this larger issue. Progressing disability services is currently a failure. The evidence is overwhelming. It is failing children and failing families. It is breaching their rights, and it is not providing therapies when they are most needed and when they are most effective. We're all aware of individual cases that represent the severe lack of services. Down Syndrome Ireland, As I Am, Inclusion Ireland and others have comprehensive reports showing the overall situation, from glaring regional variations to no therapists for over a year and a complete absence of any communication. FUS Ireland is doing incredible work highlighting how children and young adults with disabilities in Ireland face long waiting lists and a lack of supports in many cases. They have regular protests and are very active on social media. They shouldn't have to be. Each of their protests and meetings symbolises the failure of our current system. The lack of communication and accountability is a major concern. Family forums were supposed to be an important pillar of progressing disability services. As families still wait for many of the forums to be established, they have formed their own networks and have tried to proactively engage with disability services management in CHOs, but they have received very little engagement. It's essentially impossible to meet management in CHO4. Children's disability network teams are not fully staffed. This is a self-perpetuating issue here, as under-resourced teams lead to overstretched staff who feel they're not providing the care that they want to and are being ethically compromised with the limited time they can give children. They then migrate to other countries or go to private practice just to be able to do the jobs that they're supposed to do. Related to that is how student therapists are treated, many of whom receive no remuneration for their internship or placement work. If we want to retain these professionals as graduates, they need to be respected from day one. Another group that demonstrates the desperate state of disability services are the over 1,300 people under 65 forced into nursing homes because the state can't support them in community settings. These are individuals with certain clinical needs that are capable of living independently if supported. Instead, they're being institutionalised in nursing homes, spending their days with people 30 and 40 years older, knowing that under current rates of decongregation, they will never leave these homes. The Ombudsman's report last year, titled Wasted Lives, Time for a Better Future for Younger People in Nursing Home, charts the scale and the impact of this issue. In his foreword, Peter Tidal wrote, "Once you start unpicking the issues, it is clear that the systems are not in place to support people with disabilities. There is no system to ensure that every person has a key worker to enable them to access services. There is no consistent process for establishing people's needs and preferences. As a consequence, there is no way of identifying overall requirements and no planning to address them. Clinical evidence and findings from HICWA show that life is better for people not living in larger settings. We need clear plans to move these 1,300 plus people out of nursing homes." Another vital service is personal assistance. Personal assistance, along with supported independent living, are major tools in helping individuals realise their rights. There is a significant gap in demand versus supply regarding personal assistance service. This has knock-on effects as a lack of access is a barrier to independent living, education and employment. Independent Living Movement Ireland describes how the process to apply for personal assistance can be daunting and complicated. And many disabled people are told they cannot get the hours that they need. Increased funding for personal assistance will be transformative for individuals and their families, but it will also be an economic and social investment, as it will enable whole cohorts of people to enter education and employment and to live in their community. I recently attended the award ceremony of the National Learning Network in Bantry, who demonstrated that providing the right supports, such as training and transport and work placements, results in incredible success. Last year, Minister, 92% of the students progressed to either part-time or full-time employment and further education and training. That's an incredible figure, and those rates actually rival our best universities. The Convention on the Rights of People with Disability clearly outlines the importance of mechanism for disabled people to shape policy which impacts on their lives. Our legislative and consultation processes are hostile to participation from the larger public, not to mind individuals with additional needs or overstretched families. Improvements in services must be guided by the people directly affected. There is a glaring need for more investment in disabled people's organisations or DPOs and advocacy services. We have a small network of DPOs that are helping transform how we understand disability and policy. However, they have limited capacities and require proper funding streams from the government that guarantee their operations and independence. National Advocacy Service for People with Disabilities, funded through Citizens Information, is a vital service in helping represent the rights and preference of disabled people. However, this service is vastly oversubscribed, and this needs to be recognised both by the government and the Citizens Information Board. We're obliged to provide individuals and groups with the tools to advocate for themselves and to influence decision making. Finally, the motion rightly highlights the continued failure of government to publish the Disability Capacity Review Action Plan. My motion on the cost of disability included the call for the publishing of the report back in early July. Minister Rabbitte, you informed the Dáil that you had signed off on the report and that it was with Minister Donnelly. You assured us that, and I quote, "we were within weeks of having it published." Well, now it's months later, after the budget, and disabled people are still waiting for this action plan. The Disability Capacity Review was published in July 2021. It's October 2022 and still no sign of the action plan. How many more motions will it take for this plan to be published?